Imagine leaving the surface where the sun's warmth still touches your skin. As you begin to sink, the light starts to fracture and fade, turning from a brilliant turquoise to a cold, bruised purple. You are entering the twilight zone. Here, the pressure begins to mount, pushing against every square inch of your existence with a weight that has no mercy. The silence is not empty, it is heavy, a physical presence that wraps around you as you drift further away from the world of breath and bone. Below 500 meters, the sun is nothing but a memory, and the ocean reveals its true nature, a vast, crushing void that covers the majority of our planet, yet remains more alien to us than the surface of the moon. Deep beneath the waves, there is a phenomenon known as marine snow. It sounds beautiful, almost poetic, but its reality is a dark testament to the cycle of the deep. It is a never-ending rain of organic detritus, consisting of dead plankton, fecal matter, and the decaying remains of creatures from the sunlit layers above. This biological dust drifts slowly downward for weeks, coating the abyss in a thick gray blanket of death. For the scavengers in the lightless depths, this is their only source of life, a constant banquet of the fallen that reminds us that in the ocean, nothing is ever truly lost. It only changes form as it sinks into the cold, black mud. In the deepest trenches, the water pressure is so immense that it would feel like having an entire fleet of jumbo jets resting on your chest. At nearly 11,000 meters down, in the Challenger Deep, the weight of the water is over 8 tons per square inch. Human bone would shatter instantly, reduced to white dust under the sheer physical force of the liquid pillars above. Yet in this absolute crushing darkness, life still persists, pale, gelatinous forms that have evolved to be as fluid as the water itself, existing in a state of pressure that would turn a steel submarine into a crumpled soda can. There are places on the ocean floor where the water itself is toxic, creating lakes within the sea. These are known as brine pools, high salinity cauldrons that are so dense they do not mix with the surrounding seawater. They have their own shorelines and surfaces, looking like eerie underwater mirrors. But to enter one is certain death for most creatures. These pools are devoid of oxygen and filled with toxic concentrations of methane and hydrogen sulfide. They are silent graveyards where the bodies of curious fish remain perfectly preserved, floating on the surface of a subsea lake that will never let them go. In the darkness of the midnight zone, life does not use eyes to see, but light to kill. Bioluminescence is the primary language here, a cold chemical fire produced by creatures that look like they were pulled from a fever dream. The anglerfish dangles a glowing orb of bacteria to lure the curious into its needle-like teeth. Other predators flash blinding strobes to stun their prey or leave glowing trails of slime on their enemies to mark them for death. It is a world of flickering ghosts where every light you see is a trap and every shadow is a predator waiting for the battery of life to run dry. Consider the hydrothermal vents, the jagged chimneys on the ocean floor that vomit black, acidic smoke at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. This water is hot enough to melt lead, yet it does not boil because of the extreme pressure of the depths. Surrounding these hellish vents are giant tube worms and blind shrimp that thrive in conditions that should be impossible for life. They do not depend on the sun. They feed on the chemicals of the Earth's core, living in a dark, boiling oasis surrounded by the freezing, near-zero temperatures of the open abyss. The ocean floor is the largest graveyard on Earth, holding the remains of millions of shipwrecks and the souls of those who went down with them. From the rusted, collapsing hull of the Titanic to ancient wooden galleons filled with gold, these wrecks are slowly being consumed by the sea. Iron-eating bacteria dissolve the steel, turning once mighty vessels into fragile rusticles that crumble at a touch. In the silence of the deep, these ships become artificial reefs where the history of human ambition is slowly reclaimed by the silt and the currents, buried in a place where time has no meaning. There are sounds in the ocean we still cannot explain. In the late 90s, hydrophones captured a low-frequency, ultra-powerful sound known as the bloop. It was louder than any known biological creature, echoing for thousands of miles through the deep sound channels. While some scientists now attribute it to the cracking of massive icebergs, the sheer scale of the sound reminds us of how little we know. There are voices in the deep that roar in frequencies we can barely perceive, suggesting that the movement of the earth itself is the only thing capable of speaking at such a terrifying volume. We have explored less than 5% of the world's oceans, leaving a staggering 95% of our own planet a total mystery. We have better maps of the surface of Mars and Venus than we do of our own sea floor. Hidden beneath the waves are mountain ranges taller than the Himalayas and canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon. Entire ecosystems exist that have never been seen by human eyes, species that have remained unchanged for millions of years, and geological secrets that could rewrite the history of our world, all hidden under a veil of impenetrable water. Sharks are often seen as the ultimate predators, but in the deep, the hierarchy changes. The Greenland shark is a creature of glacial cold and absolute darkness, moving so slowly it is almost a statue in the water. These animals can live for over 400 years, meaning there are sharks swimming today that were alive when the first empires were rising. They are often blind, their eyes consumed by parasites, yet they navigate the lightless Arctic depths with a sensory precision that we cannot comprehend. Ghosts of the past, still hunting in the shadows of the present. The Great Blue Hole in Belize is a massive underwater sinkhole that hides a dark history of climate change. Divers who descend into its depths find giant stalactites hanging from submerged caves, structures that can only form in dry air. This means that what is now a deep, watery abyss was once a dry cave system during the Ice Age. At the very bottom, there is a layer of hydrogen sulfide and a lack of oxygen that creates a dead zone where nothing survives, and the remains of divers who ventured too deep are sometimes found, resting in the eternal stillness of the blue. Vampire squids do not drink blood, despite their name, but their appearance is truly haunting. living in the oxygen minimum zone, where almost nothing else can survive. They have jet black skin and eyes that glow with an eerie blue light. When threatened, they do not ink. Instead, they turn themselves inside out, exposing rows of soft spines, and release a cloud of bioluminescent mucus that glows for nearly 10 minutes. They are the survivors of a low-oxygen world, drifting through the dark like tattered umbrellas of the abyss. Underneath the sea, there are rivers of sand that flow with the power of an avalanche. These turbidity currents can move at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, carrying massive amounts of sediment across the ocean floor. They are powerful enough to snap underwater communication cables and bury entire ecosystems in a matter of seconds. It is a reminder that the seafloor is not a static place, but a landscape of constant, violent change, where the very ground can turn into a liquid hammer without a moment's warning. The box jellyfish is one of the most lethal creatures on the planet, possessed of 24 eyes and a nervous system that can process light and shadow. Its tentacles are lined with millions of microscopic harpoons filled with venom that attacks the heart, nervous system, and skin cells simultaneously. The pain is so excruciating that victims often go into shock and drown before they can reach the shore. It is a transparent ghost, nearly invisible in the water, a delicate fringe of death that haunts the coastal shallows. Underneath the sea, there are rivers of sand that flow with the power of an avalanche. These turbidity currents can move at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, carrying massive amounts of sediment across the ocean floor. They are powerful enough to snap underwater communication cables and bury entire ecosystems in a matter of seconds. It is a reminder that the seafloor is not a static place, but a landscape of constant, violent change, where the very ground can turn into a liquid hammer without a moment's warning. In the deep ocean, there is no such thing as a day or a night, only an eternal twilight. Because of this, many creatures participate in the diel vertical migration, the largest migration of biomass on Earth. Every night, trillions of organisms move from the deep to the surface to feed under the cover of darkness. And every morning they descend back into the abyss to hide from the sun. It is a massive rhythmic pulse of life, a dark tide that rises and falls with the rotation of the planet, hidden from the eyes of those who live on land. The Point Nemo is the most isolated place on Earth, located in the South Pacific Ocean. It is so far from land that the closest humans are often the astronauts on the International Space Station passing overhead. Because it is located within the South Pacific Gyre, it is a biological desert with almost no nutrients and very little life. It is the loneliest place on the planet, a vast expanse of water where the silence is so absolute it feels heavy, and the only thing that visits is the occasional decommissioned satellite falling from the sky. Methane hydrates are strange ice-like crystals found on the sea floor that trap massive amounts of methane gas. They are often called fire ice because they can be lit on fire even while they look like frozen water. If the ocean temperature rises significantly, these deposits could destabilize, releasing gargantuan amounts of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. This clathrate gun hypothesis suggests a terrifying feedback loop where the ocean itself could trigger a global catastrophe, a sleeping giant made of frozen gas resting in the deep. The giant isopod is a scavenger of the deep that looks like a prehistoric woodlouse the size of a cat. These creatures can go for years without eating, waiting patiently in the dark for a carcass to fall from above. When a meal finally arrives, they gorge themselves to the point where they can no longer move. They are the ultimate survivors of the abyss, slow-moving armored tanks that remind us that in a world of scarcity, patience is the most dangerous weapon of all. Whale falls are rare but monumental events in the deep. When a whale dies, its body sinks to the seafloor, providing a massive influx of nutrients to an otherwise barren environment. A single whale fall can support a complex ecosystem for over a century. First come the scavengers, then the bone-eating worms called osedacs, and finally the bacteria that break down the lipids in the bones. It is a slow, methodical dismantling of a giant, a century-long funeral where life blooms from the decay in the darkest corners of the earth. The ocean's great conveyor belt is a global system of currents that moves water around the entire planet. It takes about 1,000 years for a single drop of water to complete the entire journey. This means that the water currently sinking in the North Atlantic might not see the surface until the year 3000. It is a reminder of the ocean's immense scale and its role as the Earth's heart, slowly pumping cold and warm water across the globe, maintaining a balance that we are only beginning to understand. Consider the invisible highway of sound that exists deep beneath the surface, known as the SOFR channel. At a depth of approximately 1,000 meters, the temperature and pressure of the water create a unique acoustic layer where sound waves do not dissipate but are trapped and channeled for thousands of miles. In this cold, pressurized corridor, the low-frequency calls of blue whales can travel from one side of an ocean basin to the other, echoing through the dark like ghostly whispers across a vast, liquid cathedral. It is a place where a single sound can outlive its creator, a timeless gallery of acoustic memory that reminds us how the ocean serves as a global conductor of energy, holding on to the vibrations of the deep long after the surface has forgotten them. Rogue waves were once dismissed as the tall tales of sailors, a myth of the open sea, until modern physics and satellite imagery proved their terrifying existence. These gargantuan walls of water can reach heights of over 30 meters, appearing suddenly and without warning even in relatively calm seas. They are not caused by earthquakes or landslides, but by the mathematical convergence of smaller waves, merging their energy into a single towering monster that can crush the hull of a modern tanker in seconds. To face a rogue wave is to witness the ocean's capacity for sudden, focused violence, a reminder that the surface of the sea is governed by laws of fluid dynamics so complex that they still border on the unpredictable,
leaving even the most advanced vessels at the mercy of a calculated, watery chaos. In the deepest parts of the Southern Ocean, there exists a creature far more elusive and massive than the giant squid, the colossal squid. Weighing nearly half a ton and possessing eyes the size of dinner plates to capture the faintest glimmer of bioluminescence, this predator is armed with rotating hooks on its tentacles that can slice through flesh with surgical precision. It lives in a world of near-freezing temperatures and absolute darkness, engaging in titanic battles with sperm whales that leave deep circular scars on the whale's skin. We know of this creature mostly through the remains found in the stomachs of predators, a spectral giant that haunts the frigid edges of the world, proving that the largest inhabitants of our planet are often those that refuse to be seen by human eyes. Deep-sea corals are the ancient silent architects of the dark, building massive reefs in the freezing depths where the sun's light has never reached. Unlike their tropical cousins, these corals do not rely on photosynthetic algae to survive. They capture microscopic particles from the passing currents, growing with an agonizing slowness that spans thousands of years. Some colonies of black coral are estimated to be over 4,000 years old, meaning they were already centuries old when the Great Pyramids were being built. They are living museums of history, fragile skeletons of calcium and time that provide a home for countless alien species, standing as a testament to the fact that life does not require the sun to build monuments of breathtaking complexity and endurance. The seafloor is a landscape of fire as much as it is of water, containing more active volcanoes than all of the Earth's land masses combined. Along the mid-ocean ridge, a 60,000-kilometer chain of volcanic mountains, the Earth's crust is literally being torn apart and remade every single day. Magma rises from the mantle, hitting the near-freezing seawater and exploding into pillow-like formations of basalt, creating new territory in a violent, steaming birth that occurs in total darkness. This constant tectonic recycling means that the ocean floor is relatively young compared to the continents, a restless skin of the planet that is always being consumed and reborn in a cycle of geological transformation that dictates the very chemistry of the water above. In the subduction zones, where the massive plates of the Earth's crust slide beneath one another and sink back into the mantle, the ocean is slowly swallowing itself. As these plates descend, they carry vast amounts of water and sediment into the hot interior of the planet, where they melt and trigger the formation of volcanic arcs. This process is the primary cause of the most powerful earthquakes and tsunamis in human history, a slow-motion collision of worlds that reminds us that the peaceful horizon of the sea hides a deep, grinding machinery that can reshape the face of the earth in a matter of minutes. The trenches are not just holes in the ground, they are the throat of the world, where the ocean and the Earth's core engage in a heavy, destructive embrace.
Microplastics have now been found in the deepest reaches of the Mariana Trench, thousands of miles away from human civilization and 11,000 meters below the waves.
even in this pristine, alien void, the debris of modern life, shreds of plastic bags and synthetic fibers, has been discovered in the stomachs of amphipods that have never seen a human being. It is a sobering realization that our impact on the planet is so pervasive that it has reached the very bottom of the world before we have even fully explored it. The deep ocean, once thought to be an impenetrable sanctuary, has become a final resting place for the indestructible waste of a world that lives for the moment, a dark layer of synthetic silt that will be preserved in the geological record for millions of years. The physics of the squeeze at extreme depths is so profound that it changes the behavior of materials in ways that seem like magic. At a depth of several kilometers, the air inside a standard scuba tank would be compressed so tightly it would become a liquid, and the oxygen itself would become a deadly poison to the human nervous system. To survive these depths, specialized submersibles must be built from thick spheres of titanium or syntactic foam, materials that can withstand pressures that would liquefy a human being in a fraction of a second. This crushing weight is a physical barrier that has kept the abyss secret for eons, a guardian made of gravity and water that ensures only those perfectly adapted or perfectly engineered can ever enter its silent, heavy halls. The glass octopus is a creature of translucent beauty that drifts through the twilight zone, its body so clear that only its digestive system, its optic nerves, and its cigar-shaped eyes are visible. This transparency is a masterpiece of evolution, a form of near-perfect camouflage in an environment where there is nowhere to hide. It is a living phantom, a delicate arrangement of jelly and nerves that reminds us that in the open ocean, the best defense is not to be strong or fast, but to be a ghost, a transparent whisper that the light simply passes through without leaving a trace. There are massive underwater waterfalls that dwarf anything found on land, flowing in the cold silence of the North Atlantic. The Denmark Strait Cataract is a sub-sea waterfall where cold, dense water from the Nordic seas sinks beneath warmer water and plunges over an underwater cliff, falling more than 3,000 meters. It carries over 3 million cubic meters of water per second, a volume that makes the Niagara Falls look like a trickle. These hidden giants are the engines of global ocean circulation, driving the movement of heat around the planet, yet they remain invisible to the naked eye, a testament to the immense silent power of the currents that dictate the climate of our world from the dark. Ghost fishing nets, lost or discarded by commercial vessels, roam the oceans like undead predators for decades. These synthetic webs do not stop hunting just because they are no longer attached to a boat. They drift with the currents, trapping fish, turtles, whales, and birds in a never-ending cycle of death. As the animals die and decompose, their weight pulls the net to the seafloor. But as the flesh is consumed by scavengers, the net arises again to continue its silent, indiscriminate slaughter. These nets are a dark, man-made curse upon the sea, a reminder that the materials we create to feed ourselves can become eternal instruments of destruction when they are lost to the deep. In the Hadal zone, the very chemistry of life must change to survive. The Mariana snailfish, found at depths of over 8,000 meters, possesses proteins that are specially designed to remain flexible under pressure that would normally freeze them solid. Their skin is transparent and lacks scales, and their bones are made of cartilage rather than hard calcium to prevent them from shattering. They are the ultimate specialists, living in a world of absolute isolation, where the temperature is barely above freezing and the pressure is a constant, crushing embrace. Their existence proves that life is an unstoppable force, capable of rewriting its own biological blueprints to find a home in the most inhospitable corners of the universe. The ocean floor is a vast, uncurated museum holding the artifacts of thousands of years of human history. Because of the cold, low-oxygen environment of the deep sea, ancient wooden ships, leather shoes, and even delicate amphoras of wine have been preserved in near-perfect condition for millennia. There are more historic artifacts at the bottom of the ocean than in all the world's museums combined, a silent archive of trade, war, and exploration. Every wreck is a time capsule, a frozen moment of human drama resting in the silt, waiting for a light that may never come to reveal the stories of those who dared to cross the world's most dangerous frontier. Cold seeps are areas of the seafloor where hydrocarbons such as methane and oil leak slowly into the water, creating an oasis of life that does not depend on the sun. Unlike hydrothermal vents, which are hot and violent, cold seeps are stable and enduring, supporting colonies of clams and tube worms that can live for hundreds of years. The bacteria here convert the methane into energy through a process called chemosynthesis, forming the base of a food web that operates entirely in the dark. These seeps are like slow-burning embers in the cold void, providing a steady source of life in a desert of silt, a reminder that the Earth's own internal energy is enough to sustain a complex and beautiful world.
The immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, has found a way to cheat death that defies the laws of biology as we know them. When it reaches old age, becomes injured, or faces starvation, it can revert its cells back to their earliest form, returning to a polyp state to begin its life cycle all over again. In theory, this process can go on indefinitely, making the creature biologically immortal. It is a tiny, pulsing reminder that the ocean holds secrets of regeneration and time that we are only beginning to grasp. A creature that exists in a loop of eternal youth, drifting through the currents as a silent witness to the passing of ages.
Maelstroms and whirlpools are the ocean's own chaotic vortices, powerful enough to swallow small vessels and create a terrifying spectacle of nature's power. The Saltstraumen in Norway and the Mockstraumen are driven by the intense force of the tides, where massive volumes of water are forced through narrow straits, creating spinning funnels that reach deep into the water column. They are symbols of the ocean's unpredictable energy, a reminder that the movement of the tides is a cosmic force, driven by the moon and the rotation of the earth, capable of turning a calm sea into a swirling, inescapable trap for the unwary. Consider the Great Garbage Patch, a swirling vortex of plastic and debris in the North Pacific that is now twice the size of Texas. This is not a solid island of trash, but a plastic soup of micro-debris that chokes the surface and mid-water layers. The sunlight breaks the plastic down into smaller and smaller pieces, but it never truly disappears. It is ingested by the smallest plankton and moves up the food chain, eventually reaching the largest predators. It is a dark mirror of our own consumption, a floating monument to the permanence of our waste in a world that was once defined by its purity and its vastness. The Izu Ogasawara Trench recently revealed the deepest fish ever recorded, a type of snailfish filmed at over 8,300 meters below the surface. At this depth, the pressure is over 800 times that of the surface, pushing the limits of what vertebrate biology can endure. Beyond this point, scientists believe that the internal pressure of the fish's cells can no longer balance the external weight of the water, marking a definitive boundary for complex life. It is the final frontier of the spine, a line in the dark that marks the end of the world for anything with a heart and a skeleton, leaving the deeper trenches to the microbes and the shadows. Deep-sea gigantism is a phenomenon where creatures in the abyss grow to much larger sizes than their shallow-water relatives. From giant sea spiders with legs the size of a human's to isopods the size of footballs, the cold and the pressure seem to encourage a slow, massive growth. This is thought to be an adaptation to the scarcity of food. A larger body can store more energy and travel further in search of a carcass. These giants move through the dark with a slow, heavy grace, ancient and oversized dwellers of a world where time moves differently, and the rules of size and scale are rewritten by the cold. As you drift between the solar and abyssal divide, you realize that the ocean is not just a body of water, but a living, breathing entity with a memory that spans billions of years. It has seen the rise and fall of every species, the shifting of every continent, and the slow cooling of the planet's crust. It is the beginning and the end of all things on Earth, a vast, dark womb that holds the secrets of our past and the destiny of our future. When you listen to the silence of the deep, you are listening to the heartbeat of the planet itself, a slow, steady pulse that will continue long after the last light of the sun has faded from the surface. Consider the terrifying concept of internal waves, gargantuan movements of water that happen entirely beneath the surface, hidden from the eyes of those on ships above. These waves can reach heights of over 500 feet, moving slowly through the thermocline, where layers of different water temperatures meet. Unlike surface waves, they never break into foam or spray. They are silent, invisible giants that can suddenly pull a submarine or a deep-sea vessel downward into the crushing dark without the pilot ever seeing the danger. They are the ocean's secret internal pulse, moving billions of tons of water in a slow-motion dance that reminds us that the true power of the sea is often what remains unseen, lurking in the densities and temperatures of the middle deep. In the deepest parts of the Hadal zone, the water becomes so still and so old that it feels like a physical weight against the mind as much as the body. This is a realm of absolute sensory deprivation, where the temperature hovers just above freezing, and the silence is so profound it creates a ringing in the ears of any visitor. Here, the passage of time is measured not in hours or days, but in the slow accumulation of silt and the rare drifting arrival of a single piece of marine snow. To exist here is to experience a form of isolation that is almost spiritual, a place where the hustle of the sunlit world is a forgotten myth, and the only reality is the cold, relentless pressure of the pillars of water that stand between you and the stars.
The manganese nodules that litter the vast abyssal plains are perhaps the strangest rocks on Earth, looking like blackened potatoes scattered across the dark mud. These nodules are formed by the incredibly slow precipitation of metals from the seawater, growing at a rate of only a few millimeters every million years. They are time capsules of the planet's chemical history, containing rare minerals that have sat undisturbed for eons in the dark. As modern industries look to the deep for resources, these silent stones become a point of tension, a reminder that we are tempted to strip mine the only part of our planet that has remained pristine since the beginning of time, potentially destroying ecosystems that took millions of years to stabilize for the sake of a few decades of technology. Consider the dead zones of the ocean, vast expanses of water where the oxygen levels have dropped so low that no fish, crustacean, or complex organism can survive. These hypoxic deserts are growing, driven by the runoff of chemicals from the land and the warming of the surface waters. In these silent, suffocating voids, the only thing that thrives is anaerobic bacteria, which release toxic hydrogen sulfide gas into the water. To swim into a dead zone is to enter a world where the very essence of life, breath, has been stripped away, leaving a stagnant, ghostly wasteland where the water is clear but the silence is absolute, a dark omen of what happens when the delicate balance of the sea is tilted too far. The benthic boundary layer is the literal interface between the liquid ocean and the solid earth, a thick gray ooze that has been accumulating for billions of years. This silt is composed of the ground-down mountains of the continents and the microscopic shells of trillions of ancient organisms. If you were to step onto this surface, you would likely sink for dozens of feet into a soup of primordial mud that is almost entirely devoid of solid structure. It is the ultimate repository of the planet, a dark, soft archive where every creature that has ever died in the open sea eventually finds its final rest, slowly being pressed into the stone of the future by the unimaginable weight of the world above. In the history of naval engineering, few things are as haunting as the wrecks of nuclear submarines resting in the abyss, such as the USS Thresher or the Soviet K-129.
When these vessels failed, they did not just sink, they imploded with a force that turned steel into confetti in less than a fraction of a second, the air reaching temperatures hotter than the sun for a brief, violent moment. Today, these wrecks sit in the dark, their reactors slowly cooling in the near-freezing water, surrounded by a halo of silence and debris. They are modern tombs of technology, reminders that even our most advanced engineering is fragile when faced with the absolute, crushing authority of the deep-sea pressure. The phenomenon of deep-sea gigantism takes on a truly alien form in the pycnogonids, or sea spiders. In the freezing, high-pressure depths, these creatures can grow to have leg spans of over 20 inches, far larger than their tiny relatives in the shallows. They are so thin that they do not have a traditional respiratory system. Instead, they absorb oxygen directly through their legs, and their vital organs, including their digestive tract and reproductive systems, are housed within their long, spindly limbs. They crawl across the sea floor like skeletal ghosts, moving with a terrifying, slow-motion grace through the dark, a reminder that the deep does not just grow things larger, it grows them stranger, defying the biological structures we take for granted on land. There are underwater canyons so vast and so deep that they make the Grand Canyon look like a mere crack in the earth. The Zemjog Canyon in the Bering Sea is a gargantuan chasm cut into the continental shelf, a place where the sea floor drops away into a dizzying void of darkness and cold. These canyons are conduits for massive avalanches of sand and silt, and they are home to deep-sea corals and sponges that have never seen a single photon of sunlight. To look over the edge of such a canyon in a submersible is to experience the abyssal vertigo, a sudden, overwhelming realization of the sheer scale of the Earth's hidden geography, where the darkness goes on forever and the bottom is miles below. The sound of the sea is not just the crashing of waves, but a constant, low-frequency hum produced by the movement of the tides and the interaction of the wind with the water's surface. This Earth's hum can be detected by sensitive instruments even at the bottom of the deepest trenches, a rhythmic vibration that resonates through the very crust of the planet. It is the sound of the world breathing, a deep, resonant cello note that never stops. For the creatures of the deep, this vibration is the background music of their lives, a constant reminder of the celestial forces, the moon and the sun, that pull on the ocean's heart from millions of miles away. Consider the black swallower, a small fish with a stomach so elastic that it can swallow prey 10 times its own mass and twice its own length. Because food is so rare in the deep, this predator has evolved to never pass up a meal, even if that meal is physically impossible to contain. Sometimes the fish dies because the prey begins to decompose before it can be digested, releasing gases that cause the swallower to float to the surface like a grotesque, overinflated balloon. It is a dark metaphor for the desperation of the abyss, where the hunger is so great that it becomes a self-destructive force, a place where every meal is a gamble with death.
The ocean floor is home to brine icicles or brinicles, also known as the fingers of death. As sea ice forms in the polar regions, it expels highly concentrated salt water that is much colder than the surrounding sea. This brine sinks, freezing the water it touches, creating a hollow tube of ice that grows downward toward the sea floor. When it finally touches the bottom, it sends out a web of ice that instantly freezes any slow-moving creature, such as starfish or sea urchins, in its path. It is a slow-motion, icy predator, a delicate crystal finger that brings a silent, frozen end to anything it touches in the dark polar depths. The oxygen minimum zone is a mid-water layer of the ocean where the oxygen is so scarce that it would be an immediate death sentence for most life on Earth. Yet this zone is teeming with specialized organisms such as the vampire squid and certain species of bacteria that have adapted to live in a state of near suffocation. Their blood is uniquely designed to bind to every single molecule of oxygen they encounter, and their metabolism is tuned to a ghostly, low-energy crawl. It is a world of the living dead, a thin, horizontal slice of the ocean where life exists on the very edge of the impossible, proving that the spirit of survival can find a way to burn even in the absence of air. Deep beneath the seafloor, miles into the rocky crust, scientists have discovered a deep biosphere composed of microbes that live in the tiny cracks of the stones. These organisms do not grow or divide in days or weeks, but in decades or even centuries. They live on the faint chemical energy released by the weathering of rocks, existing in a state of geological time. This means that the Earth is not just covered with life, but is saturated with it, deep into its very foundations. There is more biomass hidden in the rocks beneath the ocean than in all the forests on the surface. A silent microscopic empire that has existed for billions of years, untouched by the events of the world above. The megalodon, while long extinct, left behind a legacy of terror that still haunts our collective imagination. These 50-foot predators once ruled the sunlit seas, but as the oceans cooled and their prey moved to different waters, they vanished. Today, we find their massive fossilized teeth on the seafloor, often covered in a thick layer of black manganese. While some dream of them still lurking in the trenches, the crushing cold and lack of food in the abyss make it impossible for such a massive, warm-blooded hunter to survive. The megalodon is truly gone, but the fact that such a monster once existed reminds us that the ocean is capable of producing nightmares of a scale we can barely fathom. Consider the zombie worms, or osedacs, which have no mouth, no stomach, and no eyes. These tiny red-fringed creatures specialize in one thing: dissolving the bones of dead whales that have fallen to the seafloor. They secrete a powerful acid that breaks down the hard calcium, allowing them to absorb the fats and proteins hidden inside the bone. They are the final scavengers of the deep, turning the skeletal remains of great whales into a soft red garden of life. Without them, the seafloor would be littered with the undecayed bones of millions of years of life. Instead, they ensure that every atom of the great whales is recycled back into the cycle of the abyss. The tripod fish is one of the few creatures that has found a way to stand on the ocean floor.
It has 3 long, thin fins that act like stilts, allowing it to perch several inches above the silt. It stands perfectly still, facing into the current with its tiny pectoral fins extended like fans, waiting for a single piece of plankton to drift into its grasp. In a world where every movement costs precious energy, the tripod fish has chosen the path of absolute stillness, a living statue that waits in the dark for hours or days, a reminder that in the deep, the winner is often the one who can stay the quietest for the longest. The hatchetfish of the twilight zone has a body as thin as a blade and silver reflective scales that act like mirrors. But its most incredible feature is its counter-illumination. Along its belly, it has light-producing organs that match the faint, dim light coming from the surface above. This makes it invisible to any predator looking upward from the dark. It is a master of optical illusion, a creature that uses light to blend into the light of the deep. It is a silent silver ghost that survives by becoming part of the very background it moves through. In the depths of the Gulf of Mexico, there are underwater asphalt volcanoes that erupt with cold, solid petroleum instead of hot magma. These strange formations, known as tar lilies, provide a hard surface for corals and anemones to grow on in an otherwise soft, muddy desert. The oil seeps out and hardens into flower-like shapes, creating a dark hydrocarbon oasis. It is a place where the Earth's inner reserves of ancient energy meet the cold water of the present, a reminder that the ocean floor is a place of endless, strange geology, where the very ground can bleed the remains of ancient forests and seas.
The Great Sound Channel, or SOFAR layer, is not just for whales. It was once used by the military to track downed pilots. By dropping a small explosive charge into the water that would detonate at the SOFAR depth, a pilot could send a signal that would travel thousands of miles to listening stations across the globe. The ocean would carry the sound with such precision that the pilot's location could be triangulated within a few miles. It is a reminder that the ocean is a perfect medium for the transmission of energy, a liquid lens that can focus and carry a human cry for help across the vast, lonely expanse of the planet. As you sink into the final layers of this journey, you realize that the ocean is the ultimate master of patience. It does not hurry, it does not complain, and it never forgets. Every drop of water has a memory, every grain of sand has a history, and every shadow in the dark is a part of a much larger, much older story. To know the ocean is to know the limits of our own understanding, a place where the darkness is not an absence of light, but a presence of something much deeper, a peace that has existed since the world was born and will remain long after we are gone. Deep within the twilight zone drifts a creature that seems to defy the very laws of anatomy, the barley fish. Within its completely transparent, fluid-filled head, its large tubular eyes sit like glowing green orbs, shielded by a crystalline dome. These eyes are not fixed forward, but can rotate upward, scanning the faint silhouettes of prey above through the roof of its own skull. To see this creature in the dark is to see a masterpiece of biological engineering, an optical system designed for the ultimate low-light environment. It reminds us that in the abyss, the boundaries between the inside and the outside, between the seen and the hidden, are as fluid as the water itself, a silent observer peering through its own transparency into the void. Consider the siphonophores, the longest organisms on our planet, reaching lengths of over 150 feet. They are not single animals, but massive floating colonies of thousands of individual zooids, each specialized for a specific task, some for stinging, some for eating, and some for moving the entire structure through the dark. They drift through the water like long, glowing ribbons of silk, a decentralized intelligence that functions as a single, terrifying predator. To encounter a siphonophore in the deep is to witness a living chain of life, a collective ghost that proves that cooperation can create giants even in the loneliest reaches of the sea. A silent, pulsing rope of light that never seems to end. As you descend, the world does not just get darker, it loses its color in a specific, haunting order. First, the red light is absorbed, turning the blood of a wounded fish into a deep, ink-black liquid. Then the orange fades, followed by yellow and green, until only the cold, piercing blue remains. This is the physics of light attenuation, where the water acts as a massive prism that slowly strips away the vibrancy of the world. In the abyss, most creatures are red or black, making them invisible in a world where red light cannot reach. To be red in the deep is to be wrapped in a cloak of shadows, a reminder that the very way we perceive the universe is a privilege of the sunlit surface. There are rivers on the ocean floor that carry not water, but sand and silt with a power that can reshape the face of the planet. These turbidity currents are subsea avalanches triggered by earthquakes or storms that plunge down the continental slope at speeds exceeding 80 miles per hour. They are silent, subterranean giants that can travel for hundreds of miles, carving out canyons and burying entire landscapes under a new layer of sediment. In the darkness, the ground itself can move like a liquid hammer, a reminder that the seafloor is a constant geological restlessness, where the foundation of the world is always being recalculated and rearranged. Resting in the silt of the Caribbean lies the wreck of the San Jose, a Spanish galleon carrying a treasure of gold, silver, and emeralds, now valued at billions of dollars. For over 300 years, it has sat in total darkness, a silent monument to human greed and the unforgiving nature of the sea. The ship is now an artificial reef, its wooden timbers slowly being reclaimed by the deep-sea life that knows nothing of the value of the stones it holds. It is a haunting image of how the ocean treats our most precious possessions. They are just more silt, more surface for the polyps to grow on, a treasure house for the fish, and a graveyard for the ambitious. In the extreme pressure of the Hadal zone, even the chemistry of bone must survive to survive. Beyond a certain depth, the water is so undersaturated with calcium carbonate that bones and shells would literally begin to dissolve into the water. This is why the inhabitants of the deepest trenches, like the Mariana snailfish, have evolved skeletons made of soft, flexible cartilage and skin that is almost entirely transparent. They have let go of the rigid structures of the upper world to survive the crushing weight of their own home. It is a lesson in the necessity of surrender. To live at the bottom of the world, one must be as soft and as fluid as the water itself. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, there lies a massive submerged stone structure that continues to baffle geologists and historians alike. With its sharp angles, flat platforms, and towering walls, it looks like a gargantuan temple or a pyramid lost to the waves. Some believe it is a remnant of a lost civilization that existed before the last ice age ended, while others argue it is a freak occurrence of natural erosion. Regardless of its origin, the Yonaguni Monument is a chilling sight, a silent gray monolith resting in the currents, a reminder that the ocean has the power to swallow entire cultures and turn our greatest monuments into puzzles for the tides to solve. The slowdown was another mysterious low-frequency sound recorded by scientists that lasted for minutes, slowly decreasing in pitch like a giant dying machine. While it was eventually traced to the friction of a massive iceberg scraping against the seafloor, the initial mystery captured the world's imagination. It sounded like the very planet was sighing, a deep, resonant groan that echoed for thousands of miles through the Sofar Channel. It reminds us that the ocean is a high-fidelity recording of the Earth's movements, a liquid ear that hears the cracking of continents and the birth of islands long before they are ever seen. The mating ritual of the deep-sea anglerfish is one of the most bizarre and dark examples of biological survival. In the vastness of the midnight zone, finding a mate is almost impossible. When a tiny male finally finds a much larger female, he doesn't just mate and leave, he bites into her side and never lets go. Over time, their circulatory systems merge, and his body slowly withers away until he is nothing more than a permanent sperm-producing organ attached to her flank. She provides the nutrients, and he provides the future. Two souls fused into a single, grotesque organism for the sake of continuing life in a world of absolute solitude. Deep-sea methane eruptions are silent explosions that can release massive amounts of gas from the seafloor in the matter of seconds. These deposits of frozen methane, or clathrates, stay stable only because of the cold and the pressure.
If the water warms, the ice turns to gas, and a giant plume of bubbles can rush to the surface, potentially lowering the density of the water so much that a ship passing above could lose its buoyancy and sink instantly. It is a reminder that the ocean is a massive warehouse of volatile energy, a sleeping giant that can turn a calm sea into a frothing, inescapable trap with a single prehistoric breath.
The L-tannin antenna was a mysterious object photographed on the seafloor at a depth of 4,000 meters in 1964. It looked like a perfectly engineered piece of radio equipment with symmetrical branches and a central pole, leading to wild theories about underwater alien bases. Years later, it was identified as a unique species of carnivorous sponge, Cladorhiza concrescens, that has evolved to look like a metallic structure to maximize its surface area for catching prey. It is a master of mimicry, a biological machine that looks so much like our own technology that it briefly convinced the world that we were not alone in the dark. The abyssal plains are the largest and flattest habitats on Earth, covering millions of square miles in a silence that has lasted for eons. They are the deserts of the deep, covered in a thick layer of fine gray ooze made of the ground-down remains of the world above. Here life is sparse and slow, consisting of pale sea cucumbers and tripod fish that wait for years for a single scrap of food. It is a landscape of absolute minimalism, a vast flat stage where the only movement is the slow drift of the currents and the falling of the marine snow, a place where the earth seems to have run out of things to say. The Greenland shark is a creature of cold and patience, living for over 400 years in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic. Moving at a top speed of only 1 mile per hour, its heart beats only a few times a minute, and its growth is measured in mere centimeters per decade. Because they live so long, they carry the history of the ocean in their very tissues, having survived the Industrial Revolution and the Atomic Age in a state of near-frozen stillness. To look into the clouded, parasitic eyes of a Greenland shark is to look into the past, a living fossil that has outlasted empires by simply refusing to hurry. Submarines use very low-frequency radio waves to communicate because standard radio cannot penetrate the conductive saltwater of the ocean. These waves require massive antennas, miles long, and can only carry a few characters of text per minute. It is a slow, primitive form of communication, a whisper of data that travels through the deep like a pulse. It reminds us that even with our most advanced satellites, the ocean remains a wall that blocks our signals, a medium that forces us to slow down and use the most basic elemental forms of energy to stay connected in the dark. In 2012, a volcanic eruption occurred near the Havre seamount, over 4,000 feet beneath the waves. It was the largest deep-sea eruption ever recorded, releasing a raft of pumice stone the size of a small city that floated to the surface. Yet because it happened so deep, no one on land heard it or saw it until the stones appeared on the waves.
It is a reminder that the Earth can undergo massive, violent transformations in total secrecy, where the pressure of the water suppresses the sound and the heat, leaving the surface world completely unaware of the fire burning in the basement of the sea. The process of whale fall succession is a dark and beautiful timeline of life from death. When a great whale dies, its body becomes an island of plenty in the desert of the abyss. For the first few months, mobile scavengers like hagfish and sharks tear away the flesh. Then, for years, small crustaceans and worms inhabit the bones and the surrounding sediment. Finally, specialized bacteria break down the fats within the bone marrow, producing sulfur that supports a chemosynthetic ecosystem for decades. It is a century-long funeral, a slow, methodical recycling of a giant that ensures that nothing is wasted in the economy of the deep. Milky seas are a rare phenomenon where vast areas of the ocean, sometimes the size of a country, glow with a steady, eerie white light. Unlike the flickering bioluminescence of disturbed water, this is a constant glow caused by trillions of bacteria living on the surface. For centuries, sailors described these glowing oceans, but scientists only recently proved their existence using satellite imagery. Imagine sailing through a sea that looks like a field of snow or a glowing cloud where the horizon disappears and the water itself becomes a source of light, a ghostly, luminous desert that stretches for hundreds of miles. The upsweep is another unidentified sound that has been recorded seasonally in the Pacific since 1991. It consists of a long train of narrow-band, upsweeping sounds that can be heard throughout the entire ocean basin. Its source remains unknown, though it is located near an area of high volcanic activity. It is a haunting, rhythmic sound that rises and falls like a siren in the dark, a reminder that the ocean has a voice that we have yet to translate, a steady, pulsing call that echoes from the seafloor and reminds us that we are guests in a world of ancient liquid energy.
Seamounds are massive underwater mountains that rise from the seafloor but do not reach the surface. They are islands of biodiversity, acting as stepping stones for life to travel across the vast, empty basins of the ocean. The currents that hit these mountains are forced upward, bringing nutrients from the deep and creating a thriving oasis of corals, fish, and sharks in the middle of the open sea. There are tens of thousands of these hidden peaks, many of which have never been visited by a human or a camera. A world of mountain ranges that exist in eternal night, teeming with life that has never seen the sun. As you reach the end of this layer of the abyss, you begin to see the ocean not as a void, but as a mirror. It reflects the sky, it reflects our history, and it reflects the very nature of time itself. It is the largest living entity on the planet, a cold, dark, and beautiful mind that holds the secrets of life and the silence of death in a perfect, watery balance. When you finally close your eyes and let the currents take you, you are not just sleeping, you are returning to the beginning of the story, drifting back into the dark womb of the world where all life first began. Beyond the reach of every sunbeam, where the pressure becomes a physical entity that defines the very limits of existence, there is a phenomenon known as abyssal stasis. In these deepest layers of the world, biological processes slow down to a pace that we, as creatures of the surface, can barely perceive as life. Here, the metabolic rates of organisms are so low that a single heartbeat can be separated by minutes of absolute stillness. It is a world where time does not tick, but rather flows like thick, heavy oil. To enter this zone is to witness the ultimate victory of the environment over the organism, where life has surrendered its frantic energy to become one with the cold, eternal patience of the water, a silent existence where the only goal is to remain as still as the stone itself. Consider the carbon pump, the ocean's massive, silent machinery for regulating the very air we breathe. Trillions of microscopic phytoplankton at the surface capture carbon dioxide and, through the simple miracle of their own life and death, transport it to the bottom of the sea. When they die, they sink, carrying that carbon into the deep silt, where it is locked away for millions of years. This is a global engineering project that has no architect, a biological filter that keeps our planet cool and balanced. The ocean floor is not just a graveyard, it is a massive carbon vault, a silent warehouse of the past that prevents the world above from burning, holding the weight of our atmosphere in its cold, dark hands. Deep within the Gulf of Mexico, there are underwater brine lakes that are so dense and so salty they have their own waves and shores, appearing like mirrors reflecting the darkness of the abyss. These lakes are formed by the dissolution of ancient salt deposits beneath the seafloor, creating a liquid so heavy it sits in depressions like a pool within the sea. But these mirrors are deceptive. They are devoid of oxygen and filled with toxic levels of methane. Any creature that accidentally swims into one is instantly pickled, preserved in an eternal salty stasis. They are the lakes of the dead, silent, shimmering traps that remind us that even within the water there are boundaries that life cannot cross and horizons that lead only to a beautiful, toxic end. The colossal squid, a phantom of the Southern Ocean, remains one of the greatest enigmas of the deep, a predator that grows to half a ton and possesses eyes the size of human heads. These eyes are designed for one specific purpose: to detect the faint bioluminescent glow disturbed by the movement of sperm whales in the dark. It is a creature of pure stealth, moving through the freezing currents with a slow-motion grace that belies its terrifying power. We have only seen it in fleeting glimpses or in the scars it leaves on the hides of giants, a reminder that the largest inhabitants of our world are often those that have no desire to be known, living in a realm of shadow where the only light is the fire of the hunted. In the physics of the deep, there is a concept known as decompression sickness that affects not just the human diver, but the very chemistry of the water.
As one moves upward from the abyss, the gases dissolved in the blood and tissue under extreme pressure begin to form bubbles, like a carbonated drink being opened. This is why the inhabitants of the deep can never visit the surface. The very air we breathe would cause their bodies to expand and fail from the inside out. They are prisoners of the pressure, held in place by the weight of the world. It is a biological law that ensures the secrets of the deep stay in the deep, a wall made of gravity and gas that separates our world from theirs as effectively as the vacuum of space. Deep-sea snowstorms are not made of ice, but of the constant falling remains of the world above, a gray rain of organic detritus that coats the seafloor in a thick, velvety blanket. For the scavengers in the lightless depths, this is their only source of energy, a constant banquet of the fallen. To see this from a submersible is to witness a silent, never-ending funeral, where the history of the sunlit world is slowly being buried in the silt. It is a reminder that in the ocean, nothing is ever lost. It only changes form, sinking into the cold black mud to become the foundation of the future, a cycle of life that is as old as the planet itself and as quiet as the fall of a shadow.
The bioluminescent clouds produced by certain species of deep-sea shrimp are a form of chemical defense that looks like a liquid explosion of blue fire. When threatened, these shrimp do not release ink. They vomit a glowing fluid that hangs in the water, blinding and confusing the predator while the shrimp escapes into the surrounding dark. It is a spectacular display of light used as a weapon, a cold fire that burns in the freezing water for several minutes before fading back into the void. It reminds us that in a world without light, the ability to create it is the ultimate power, a spark of defiance against the absolute authority of the night. Within the subduction zones, the ocean floor is being dragged into the Earth's mantle at the rate of a few centimeters per year, carrying billions of tons of water into the hot interior of the planet. This water acts as a lubricant for the tectonic plates, facilitating the movement of continents and the birth of volcanoes. Without this deep-sea recycling, the Earth would be a geologically dead planet like Mars. The trenches are the recycling centers of the world, where the old crust is consumed and the building blocks of new land are prepared. It is a slow, grinding machinery of fire and water, a reminder that the peaceful surface of the sea is the roof of a much larger, much more violent engine. Consider the Point Nemo, the most isolated point in all the Earth's oceans, where the silence is so absolute that the only thing louder than the water is the sound of your own heartbeat. It is a place so far from any coast that the nearest humans are often the astronauts orbiting in the International Space Station. Because it is located in the center of a massive oceanic gyre, there are almost no nutrients and very little life. It is a watery desert of immense proportions, a place where the stars are the only companions and the only sounds are the whispers of the wind. It is the ultimate sanctuary for the weary, a place where the world truly ends and the silence finally begins. The oceanic magnetic field is a subtle, invisible force generated by the movement of the salt water through the Earth's magnetic field. Many creatures, from sharks to sea turtles, use this field to navigate the trackless expanse of the ocean with a precision that defies our own technology. They feel the pull of the poles in their very bones, guided by an internal compass that never fails. It is a reminder that the ocean is not just a body of water, but a field of energy, a liquid lens that connects every part of the planet through a silent magnetic language that we are only beginning to understand. In the final layers of the abyss, the abysso-pelagic zone, the temperature remains a constant freezing 2 degrees Celsius, and the darkness is absolute. This is the largest habitat on Earth, a vast, uniform void that covers over half of the planet's surface. Here, there are no seasons, no days, and no nights, only the eternal now. It is a place of absolute minimalism, where the complexity of life has been stripped down to its most basic essential forms. It is the ultimate resting place of the planet, a dark, soft cradle where the Earth's memory is kept in a state of perfect, frozen peace. The global conveyor belt of ocean currents takes over 1,000 years to complete a single circuit around the planet. A drop of water that sinks today in the North Atlantic will travel through the deep basins of the Indian and Pacific Oceans before finally returning to the surface in a different millennium. It is a reminder of the ocean's immense scale and its role as the Earth's heart, slowly pumping heat and life across the globe in a rhythm that spans generations. When you listen to the waves, you are listening to a pulse that began long before you were born and will continue long after you are gone. As you reach the end of this journey into the dark, the ocean reveals its final secret. It is not a place of death, but a place of infinite quiet life. It is the womb of the world, the guardian of the past, and the architect of the future. It holds our stories, our treasures, and our dreams in its cold, dark embrace, protecting them from the noise and the light of the world above. To know the ocean is to know peace, a deep, resonant silence that settles into the soul and calms the heart. Imagine the water rising slowly around you, not as a weight, but as a comfort, a cool and gentle touch that washes away the fatigue of the day. You are drifting now, moving with the slow, rhythmic pulse of the tides, away from the surface and into the quiet. The light is fading, the sounds are muffled, and the only thing that remains is the steady, peaceful beat of the sea. You are safe, you are held, and you are home. Let the darkness be your blanket, and the silence be your song. The journey is over, the depths are still, and the world is at rest. You are now part of the deep, a silent scribe of the night, drifting in the eternal peace of the sleeping sea. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the current take you into the dream that has no end. The ocean is watching over you, and the silence is your guide. Good night under the ancient watery stars.